Welcome back, everybody, to the Build Your Legacy Insurance Edition podcast. Today, we're going to talk about producers, and more specifically about hiring producers and the questions we get regarding that. And this doesn't matter if you're a new agency, doesn't matter if you're an existing agency. Everybody wants to know about producers. So with that being said, and without diving into all the questions that people ask about producers, the one specific thing that we get is, are producers employees or are they independent contractors? So more specifically, we look at it, are they W-2 employees? Are they 1099 employees or 1099 independent contractors? And I think that gets mixed quite a bit. All right, so to dive into this, we brought in Stefani Butschle with SIA Group. Stephanie's a VP for SIA Group and in-house legal counsel. And so I want to introduce Stefani and have Stefani introduce herself more and why she's relevant to this specific conversation.
Well, certainly relevant. Obviously, I came into SIA, as you remember, as legal counsel, but also to develop an HR department for the agency. So one of the big things that most agencies are missing is somebody that even understands what's required for HR, employment law, all of the above. So came in to do that. Prior to that, I was working for a local law firm and did unemployment, did workers' comp. So a lot of employment law was in that. We've really drilled upon that with not only the agency, but also with our clients, and now obviously wanting to branch out to talk about this with your ISMs.
All right, so let's dive into this a little bit more, Stefani. Let's talk about the two different classifications with producers specifically in mind here.
So with producers in mind, like you mentioned before, you're really looking at, is this person an employee of my agency or are they an independent contractor, which we oftentimes say back and forth, 1099 independent contractor. Essentially, they're the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, so I see that a bunch with agencies. I mean, as we talk to agencies, everybody just calls them producers.
Right.
So you really have to dig in a little bit deeper to figure out, are they really employees or are they independent contractors? I guess the IRS definition is kind of the key point.
Right. I mean, you always want to go back to that, because at the end of the day, why you're deciding what you classify somebody as is, how are you paying them? How are they paying taxes? And what regulatory bodies are going to come after you if you do it improperly?
Okay. So let's talk about it. We talk about independent contractors. A lot of agencies do that. Right, wrong, indifferent. We're not here to tell somebody what they're doing is right or wrong. But tell me a little bit more about 1099.
Again, 1099 means independent contractor.
Okay.
Okay. The IRS defines an independent contractor as somebody who provides services to businesses and has the right only to control the result of what that person is doing. Okay. So think about it this way. Think about I hire a plumber to come and do some different things at my office. Okay, I need them to fix a faucet. I need them to fix the toilet. They certainly aren't working for me. All I'm asking them to do is fix the toilet. I'm not telling them how to do it. I'm not giving them tools. I'm not helping them in any way, shape, or form. Okay. That is what the IRS defines an independent contractor as. The biggest thing to really think about with those individuals is, again, think about that plumber, is, again, has his own tools, sets their own hours for the most part. They are going to be subject to self-employment tax. Okay. Again, you're not providing anything to that. You're not paying taxes for that individual. They're not eligible for anything the company offers. They don't get benefits. They're not afforded protections under the law that all employees are to get, which obviously we can dive into what those are when we talk about an employee, but I really want to focus on that comparison factor.
Okay.
Is if I'm in that position and I'm trying to decide whether this person can be an independent contractor or not, is how much control do you have over this person? Because it's always going to come down to that.
Okay. So While you just said that, let's jump into a W-2 because that way we can kind of compare, contrast. So what does the W-2 mean?
So W-2, obviously a little similar and a little different here, is it means employee. So again, they use the different words. It's only because W-2 is the form that an employee files with the IRS. The real difference here, again, is going to be that control factor. Again, an employee is somebody that you have the right to control everything that they do in their job duties. You dictate their hours. You dictate their tasks. You dictate how they do things. You provide them everything that's required to do that job. So even think about something as simple as I'm given this computer to do my job. I'm given paper, pens, everything that's needed to do my job.
Okay. Emails, addresses, does that mean anything or no?
Yes. Actually, I can say this from personal experience here. We used to have somebody on staff at SIA Group that we were like, they're only going to do projects for us. They were a prior employee. They were moving to Japan. Okay, we're here in North Carolina. How can I really control what she does in Japan? We thought, no big deal. We'll just send her some projects. But what we allowed her to do was continue to have an SIA Group email. In our minds, that was just easy for us. Convenience factor. We're used to this. Everyone has our email. Well, the Department of Revenue came in to do an unemployment audit on us. And the first thing they did was go down that list of everyone that had an employee email address and targeted anybody that we were calling an independent contractor. At that point, she was the only one, of course. We went through, I even argued our case, and they said, absolutely not. You have given her tools to do her job. So she is an employee, and you now owe taxes on her behalf. If she wants, you also have to go through benefits. So again, we can talk about consequences later, but even something as simple as an email address can be seen as creating that employer-employee relationship.
Stephanie, what we see a lot of is producers out there that work for insurance agencies. I don't know if they're a W-2 or a 1099 unless I dive into it, but let's say they are a producer working for an agency, and that is their sole job,
right? Is
to work for this agency. They're probably earning a good wage because they're only working for this agency. If this agency puts them on a 1099, is that okay?
So again, it's still going to come down to that control factor. So I will say, though, that is a factor that is looked at by the IRS. If I'm working for your agency and your agency alone, they are at least going to question whether you are actually an employee. Now, certainly you can get into the weeds there of, again, how much control do I really have over you? But even, again, take something as simple as, I bet that if you're an independent contractor, per se, and only working for one agency, I'm sure you are branded to that agency.
Yeah, good point.
I bet your business cards say that agency. Obviously, email address, I would assume. I bet the business card itself, phone number is feeding to that agency. So how do you really overcome that?
Okay. Yeah, good question. I guess that would be for them to argue their point.
Exactly.
If they got put in that situation, and that's certainly up to them. Now, why do you feel agencies even go down the route of 1099 producers? What's the benefit for them to do that?
So obviously, the biggest benefit is not having to pay in taxes on behalf of that 1099 individual. You don't have to offer them benefits. So at the end of the day, you are definitely looking at less compensation. You are simply only paying them likely commission. That's generally what we see in these setups, commission only. So your overhead becomes substantially less.
I mean, and that's kind of what I would think too, because when we work with a lot of agencies, we don't see 1099 used at certain agencies. We see it used a lot in other agencies. Again, it's for everybody to choose. And I do think the number one reason they do it is just because it saves money.
I should also add, I mean, it can be a little simpler. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's still going to be monetary related, but filings, payroll, things of that nature are certainly going to be a little more complicated with an actual employee. But again, it's not a lot. It's not extensive.
Okay. So we've got a couple benefits. What's the consequence? What's the penalty? What's the reason somebody would opt not to do a 1099 and do a W-2?
So the biggest really risk and consequence here is also going to be monetary.
Okay.
So go backwards. I'm going to just use a simple, it's been 1 year I've had this producer on my sort of payroll, but not payroll, is he should have been potentially offered benefits. He should have been paying in taxes, and I should have been matching those taxes. He should be getting, again, all of the different things that the company offers, to include expense reimbursement, equipment. All of that is going to be retro required to be paid. That could also, now I know producers, this isn't really going to be much of an issue, but over time, things of that nature would have to be retro paid. But even more than that is you start looking at some of the penalties and fines that can come into play. So take that 1 year. If I was supposed to pay that person their Social Security, I now have to match it. That all has to be paid. I have to take all of the time and effort to reclassify them in all of your records. You may have to even provide them either the cost of the benefits that they should have received, or find a way to provide them the coverage or the cost. So as the example, benefits, we always think of medical benefits. There's lots of others. But for that purpose, if I was supposed to have had that coverage for the past year, say I had a catastrophic claim, that employee could come after you to pay that claim.
Okay. So you could be on the hook for a lot.
Yes. And think about it. Most people aren't realizing this until they've been in this relationship for quite some time. So when you start adding all of that up, it's very costly. And again, it's one of those things I look at as just really not worth the risk.
Okay. So our retail agency at SIA Group, and the one Stephanie works with as well, we have W-2 employees as our producers. So let's go down that road, the benefits of a W-2 producer employee.
So number one is, I'm just at least going to throw out there, is the control factor. Obviously, if they're a W-2, you get to dictate how they operate and how they do business. It's really somewhat your brand. You want them to be acting and supporting your brand and business in a certain way. An independent contractor, if they truly are one, you really don't have that option. But another really big one is going to be when you want to have restrictive covenants. So say I bring on a new producer, I clearly am going to want them to sign an employment agreement saying that if they leave me, they're not going to take all of my clients with them. There are certain things that cannot be put in a contract with an independent contractor. So not to say that those covenants can never be used, but they have to be extremely strict and limited and are sometimes found to be completely invalid. So you bring in those types of individuals, you risk having absolutely no recourse when they leave you. And again, you probably gave them access to a lot of information, even though you're saying they're a contractor.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the items that we look at, and I'll say another pro that I see for agencies doing W-2 is at the time of sale. And so, you know, we've certainly had experience, both you and I, working with agencies and acquiring agencies. And one of the things I do look at are who controls the business, what producer has it, how big's their book of business. We can go through all the things you have to do as you're looking to acquire an agency. But if they have 1099 producers that control books of business inside there, does this agency really have anything to sell us, to sell anyone? Or do you have to work out a separate deal maybe with that 1099 person, knowing that they could just walk at any time with that business?
100%. So in those types of situations that we've dealt with in the past, what we're doing is when we're negotiating to purchase that agency, we're saying as a contingency, we also have to have an agreement with these two individuals, because at the end of the day, you as the owner don't actually own the piece that we really want, which is the ability to have that expiration.
Or certain pieces of it, right? Because
Yes.
it could be, we can just throw a number out there. It could be $1 million commission agency, and it may be $500,000 of commission is controlled by 1099 producers.
Right.
And so at that point, it's 50% of the agency may not be really owned by the agency owner.
Right.
They may think so.
Right. And think about it. When we purchase an agency, we always know there's going to be a little bit that's going to fall off. When we purchase a book that is controlled by independent contractors, your potential to keep that business is almost minimal.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to what you said as well. Is it's got to be maybe multiple contracts in there to buy it. So I look at it as the perk of at time of sale, 1099 producers, they can throw a kink in things. Not to say that they can't be overcome, because we certainly can overcome it. And buyers can certainly overcome it. But it may take more steps. And those producers may require more. They may be more demanding, which from a buyer's perspective may be fine. But from an agency owner seller perspective, may not be. Because they may have thought that their agency was worth X, and now it's really worth 50%, because
Right.
these 1099 employees are kind of holding their feet to the fire.
Yeah, exactly. Because they now have leverage.
Yeah.
And is that really how you want to set your business up?
Yeah, so certainly wanted to throw that thing out there at the very end as a perk for a W-2. Is there anything we missed?
I don't think so.
We're not here to tell people what to do. We're here to give them ideas. It works 1099 for some people. W-2s work good for others. At the end, you have to be able to justify your case, whether it's with the IRS, whether it's with really anybody. You
Right.
got to be able to justify your case. So whatever our listeners want to do, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people probably on a daily basis, I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to point you in the direction. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has to make this decision. It's your business. You're the one that's on the hook. You need to decide, how are you going to fight this if you are ever challenged? Obviously, always consult with your attorney and go through that before you ever make any calls. Again, this is guidance. We'll give you the tools that we've got, but it's your business on the line.
Yeah, good. Look, thank you for coming. I appreciate you joining us today, Stephanie. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. You can catch our Build Your Legacy Insurance Edition podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, or send us over a topic recommendation at podcast@siaofnc.com. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, visit us online at www.siaofnc.com. We hope you enjoyed our newest episode. See you next week.